For those that don't know, my name is David Riley. I'm AOE for Marion County Election Commission. I have asked, more like begged, Bureau of Ethics and Campaign Finance Office to help me kind of take a bird's eye view of some of the uh, campaign finance disclosures that we have to collect for our local candidates. And Lauren from the office has agreed to help me out. Lauren, if you'll kind of give your credentials to the audience a little bit. Uh,
Sure. My name's Lauren Topping. I'm the general counsel for the Bureau of Ethics and Campaign Finance. So our office handles all the campaign finance statements at the state level, um, and we enforce filing requirements, and we also review every filing that comes through our door for accuracy. And our office is also required to conduct audits of state candidates. Obviously, we're not going to be reviewing every one of your filings, and we're not going to be doing audits of your filings. But we can tell you kind of what the pitfalls are and what the big problems that we see are, the things that people need to keep in mind. And so I'm happy to do that today. And just kind of a reminder not to scare anyone, but just kind of let you know what the stakes are is, as long as everything's good and you're reporting the best of your ability, you're probably going to be fine, but there's always the possibility that if you do something wrong or something looks weird, someone might file a complaint. Complaints about campaign finance records start at the local level with the DA's office. The DA then does an investigation and sends it to our office. If our office determines that you did make a mistake and that mistake was a violation of law, then you could be subject to civil penalties. So we want that not to happen, and that's why we're happy to help out and keep you all on the straight and narrow.
And to that end, obviously, candidates, the first thing that they're going to be starting out with, uh, many candidates have already started indicating that they are getting ready for our county primary. Trying to get to the first issue, which is our assigning your political treasurer. And that form, I believe we are looking at it now, looks a lot like this for our local candidates. And of course, we've got, uh, we're just filling in the blanks here with farcical names and
Mhm.
information. But this is the first piece of information that we'll collect from you. And you can be your own campaign treasurer. But as you see, then we need candidate to sign. We need a witness to sign for the candidate, and we need that turned in. Now, that does not need to be notarized. That's correct, Lauren. It can just simply be witnessed.
That's correct. Yeah.
And we need that turned back in to us here locally at the election commission for our local candidates.
Mhm.
And that doesn't matter what you're running for, whether it's municipal, whether it's county-wide, whether it's commission, district, county commission district. Yeah, every campaign needs to have a treasurer assigned. Um, so if you are planning on running, you will be filling one of these out. Um, so um, then, if you are collecting any kind of money, and it doesn't matter if you are taking that money from mom and dad or brother, sister, or just from your neighbor, I suggest that you just have something real simple already established, something similar to this where you can keep up with their name, their address, employer, contribution date. Um, just from other people's experience, and Lauren, you can kind of chime in here, but
Mhm.
some kind of donor ID number uh, that kind of helps you keep up with if people give more than once, like in this case, we have political candidate senior gave twice here. So their aggregate total, that becomes important over the course of the campaign, where you're keeping up with their cumulative total to make sure that you don't hit a threshold that gets them or you in trouble for taking, I think it's 1900, is that correct?
Yes,
Well,
that's right.
but
1900.
this is what happens when you end up with an unitemized
Hmm.
um, contribution as far as what that means from the state level. Uh,
Sure. Sure. So when you're filling out your report for any contribution that is over $100, you have to fill out full donor information. So name, address, occupation, employer, amount of the contribution, and what their total aggregate amount contributed so far is. If you receive smaller dollar donations, where say the donation is only $25, you don't have to report all of that same information on your report. Instead, what you could do is what's called unitemized reporting. And you could report, say you got 10 $25 contributions, you could report that $2,500 all at one time without having to give all of these details on the report. But you need to keep up with all of this information that David's showing you, because if any individual that you've gotten money from crosses $100, then you have to start fully itemizing their contributions going forward, even if the dollar amount that you actually received is less than that $20, or is less than $100, because their aggregate exceeds $100. So how would that happen? So it might happen because they gave $20 at this event and they gave $20 over here at another event. Or maybe they paid $50 for them and their spouse to attend a fundraiser dinner or something like that. And so all of those small dollar contributions have to be kept up with, so that you know when you hit that $100, and you have to start fully itemizing all of their contributions and keeping track of that aggregate, so that you can show that that person has not exceeded contribution limits. So, some of the most common questions that we get at the local level about fundraisers is, what counts as a contribution? Well, a ticket to a fundraiser is a contribution. If they buy a T-shirt from you, that is a contribution to your campaign. If they buy a yard sign from you, that's a contribution to your campaign. If they give you any amount of money other than exactly what that yard sign cost you to produce, then that is a contribution to your campaign. And so all of that has to be kept up with, and it all has to be potentially reported in one form or another. Um, The next question I get is, well, can I just pass around the hat at, the baseball game or at church or, at my fundraiser? Can I just have a bowl where people drop things in? And we really discourage that type of fundraising. And the biggest reason that we discourage that is because you cannot keep track of where the money comes from. We've all seen the little envelopes that the church will give you where you can fill out your name and information, and you can try to do that. But if somebody doesn't completely fill it out and you don't know who that person is, it's going to be really hard for you to go back and figure all that information out. And so we really just don't recommend it. If you want to do something like that, then the best advice I can give you is to have someone sitting at your table to make sure that they take down that information for every person who's dropping in money, or that every person has completely filled out their envelope. Because if you don't get that information, you're going to have to go try to figure it out on the back end. And a lot of people don't want to do that, which again is why we don't recommend these kind of practices. And sometimes it just can't be done. So I know David has a red line there on his spreadsheet where you got a contribution in, but you don't know who it came from. That is not the end of the world. It's not going to be that big of a deal, but you can't use that money for your campaign. What we tell you to do is, if you receive any money that you can't account for, that is anonymous, essentially, that you can't report the contributor, then you have to donate that money to charity, and you can't use it for your campaign. So again, it is really important to keep up with who gives you what and when they do it. And even though you're not always going to be able or be required to report this on your disclosure, you need to be able to support your disclosure fully, and you need to be able to know what happened in the first quarter during the third quarter when you're filling out your third quarter disclosure. So it's really good to keep running log of all of this information, because it's really easy to forget what happened in January when you're in October and you need to fill out one of these reports. So just keep track as you go, and things will be much better.
Okay. And Lauren, also, you mentioned, um, and I think this happens a little bit more on the state level, but you talked about the donations for the signs, but
Mhm.
so if a sign, and just for simplicity, if a sign costs me $1 to make and I'm asking for donations of $3 for a yard sign, then I'm reporting $2.
No, in that scenario, you're still going to report the entire $3 as the contribution, because
Okay.
that's what they paid. And then, whatever your costs for the signs are, that will be reported as an expenditure for the signs, in one lump sum. So that's how that'll offset.
Okay, and we spoke offline about this a little bit, but talk to me about if I, as a candidate, went ahead and bought my signs, if I were going to report that on my disclosure as a as a as an expenditure for something I was going to get reimbursed for from the donations, what would be the best way for me to report that on the disclosure for it to
Mhm.
be the most clean on the
Right.
disclosure to get that reported?
Yeah. So you can really do it one of two ways. The simplest way to do it is, say you're a candidate and you paid $1,500 for your signs, and or sorry, let's use a smaller number. Let's say you paid $500 for your signs, and you paid that out of your personal checking account. then on your disclosure, you would just report a $500 in kind contribution to the campaign. And that shows the money going to the campaign. Once you have the ability to reimburse yourself and you want to cut the check back to yourself, then all you have to do is report an expenditure of the same amount on your campaign disclosure. And in the purpose of, you'll put your own name as the vendor paid. And then on the purpose, you'll write, return of in-kind contribution or reimbursement of in-kind contribution. And that is really the easiest way to do that and make everything balance and make it clear what happened. The other way is a little more complicated, but it doesn't really make any less sense. What we always recommend for folks is that they have a designated bank account for their campaign so that all the money that comes in goes into that bank account and all the money that goes out comes out of that bank account. It's really just the easiest for accounting purposes. So if you were to put that $500 into that bank account before you made that expense, but even knowing that it is an expense that's coming, that's going to be paid, what you could do is report a loan into the account for that $500 from yourself, and then, report the expenditure like you normally would as coming out of the account. And once you're ready to reimburse yourself for the $500 that you put in to cover that expense, then you would just report a loan repayment for the amount of that $500. And you can do it either way. And it really just is a difference of whether you put the money in the bank account first or whether you just paid it out of your personal funds first. And that's the difference.
I gotcha. And this is why we suggest that you find a way to keep that information, because on your disclosure, all of this information gets asked for. And so that's why we suggest that you have a way to just go ahead and be keeping up with it as you go along, so that when it's time to do the disclosure paperwork, it's just a question of plug and play the information that you've already got. And so, it is not a question of trying to go back through 160,000 different pieces of paper. It's already collected, and you're just transferring it onto the paperwork that you've already got. And just remember, this will be the first page of those itemized contributions, and you'll carry that balance for however many pages that you have on these. You'll just keep carrying that forward for as many pages as it takes until you get to the end of the report. And I apologize, I had great intentions of being able to populate an entire report for you, which, well, to put it mildly, I did not complete, but this gives you an idea of what it might look like if you could read it, because I was going to do it in my handwriting, and well, I know good and darn well nobody would have been able to read it that way. So, but again, so just remember, every candidate is going to assign a treasurer, municipal, uh, commission district, countywide. Everybody's going to have a treasurer. Um, uh, and even if you have no intention of taking money from anybody but yourself, you're still going to have a treasurer. Even if it's you, you're still going to assign a treasurer. Um,
And one
I,
other thing that I wanted to, and I apologize if I'm jumping ahead, David, but I
no
know we
worries.
talked about it offline, so I want to make sure that we talk about it on our recording here. Is we strongly discourage folks from using electronic methods to take in campaign contributions. If you are someone who wants to do that, then we would recommend that you use a platform that's designed for that. So there's WinRed, there's Anodot, there's ActBlue. Those are designed for campaign finance. Even they have their problems and their flaws. But if you're going to do it, use something that's designed for it. Um, I would strongly discourage anybody from using Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, Square, any of those kinds of applications to take in contributions, just because those applications are not designed for this purpose. So they're not going to keep track of this information for you. They're not going to ask for an occupation employer. They're not going to automatically give you an address. They're not even, some of them automatically going to give you a name. They at most are going to give you like a handle or a tag. And if you know these people that are contributing to you, maybe that's not as big of a deal because you can go back in on the back end and complete this spreadsheet and fill this all in for those contributions. But if you get 5 or 6 from people that you don't know, you're not going to be able to go back and figure out who they are in order to account for these contributions properly. And then you're going to end up in that situation of you can't return the money because you don't know who it is, but you can't use it because it's anonymous. So you have to donate it to charity. So we just really don't recommend using those platforms for anybody that you don't personally know. The other thing that it causes problems with those platforms is that, like I said, they're not going to keep track of information, and they're going to rely on the information that people put in. So we've had candidates, find out that people are not putting valid information in those platforms. And that's even true of the ones that are designed for campaign purposes. And we've had a lot of instances where people would get a contribution through one of those platforms, and the name on the contribution was Mickey Mouse. Well, that's not a valid name. So it's not a valid contribution. And unless you can go back and figure out who gave you that money and where it came from so that you can police that data and put it in correctly in your report, it's going to be a problem. And even those big campaign finance platforms have that problem. The other thing to keep in mind is that all of those platforms charge a processing fee. So if you pay the processing fee, then you got a $25 contribution in, and you're going to have to report an expenditure of $3 for the processing fee that goes out, even though that really is never going to come out of your bank account. It's just going to be deducted from the amount that they give you into your bank account. But you're going to have to report that as 2 separate items. So again, you have to keep track of what the contribution amount was and what the fee amount was. Some of these platforms also allow the contributor to pay the fee. In that scenario, the entire amount of the contribution, is the contribution plus the fee. So say it's a $25 contribution with a $3 fee, then what you really have is a $28 contribution in. And then you have to report separately the $3 fee out, even though that never hit your bank account and you never actually cut a check for that. But because it's part of the total transaction, you still have to make sure you're keeping track of that and reporting it properly. So again, these platforms can be a great way to take in lots of money, but they come with some very real hassles and headaches. And so we just really don't recommend it unless you are willing to be really diligent in making sure that you keep your records and keep them accurately, and that you complete your finance reports accurately as well.
Yeah, and I appreciate you remembering that because I had completely forgotten about that. Um, and then finally, one thing I did want to mention at our marionvotes.com under candidate information, I do have several, I've got several links, including to Bureau of Ethics and Campaign Finance. They've got a lot of good information, a lot of it specified to state and larger candidates. But if you'll go through, you'll find for the local candidates as well. Um, just be aware everything that they've got a lot of the um, and of course now that I caught myself on it, yeah, everywhere that you've got state and local candidates, those are your forms. Um, and of course, if you've got any questions, you feel free to contact us here. Um, all of our contact information is down here at the bottom. My name's David Riley, and of course, you can contact anybody there. Um, but hope this gives a little bit of information for you, gives you a few potholes to avoid. And I want to appreciate Lauren spending a little few minutes with us and giving us a little more information. Really appreciate your willingness to step in with us. And
Absolutely.
so hopefully we'll have a bunch of clean reports for us. So
Sounds
thank you
good.
very much.